Hey Garrett, I love your channel, dude. In preparation for another dragon drive, Ryan's not coming with me this time. He'd rather sit with the cool kids, so he's riding with Eric Yost F him. Just for clarification, I don't mean F Eric Yost. Eric's actually a great person. In contrast to Rye can suck a big bag of chips. I can't cuss this early in the video. Okay, so we're back from drag week. That is in the rearview mirror. As soon as I got back, I jumped on getting the quarter panel of the Caprice fixed because we were getting harassed all week by the announcers. Brian and Dave were just going in on it. So I took the car to the body shop and it turned out absolutely awesome. I didn't think the quarter panel could be saved, but these guys did work. So if you watched the drag week video, you probably saw, or the video series rather, you probably saw this quarter panel all bashed in. 2 days before we're supposed to leave, wheel came flying off on the highway, put the car in a ditch, folded up the quarter panel in the ditch. Afterwards, my buddy Corey Stovall out of Louisville hit me up. He said, hey, I got a guy with a frame rack. He could probably get that thing straight. And Wheeler's Body Shop, South End area, Louisville, took care of it, knocked it out, got this thing in primer, looking straight as an arrow. And then Corey came back and sprayed the quarter panel to make it all look groovy. It's a groovy situation now. It's no longer a beat up situation. And this is how she sits now. So I can't be happier with the straightness of the situation. I also picked up a set of Twankies from Facebook Marketplace for $600. The guy posted them and I was like, well, I mean, yeah, that's a for sure go-to, but I'm gonna have to slam this thing to the ground. It needs to get on air ride, I believe. Bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. Oh, he tricked me. But we still had a low oil pressure situation on our hands. So I haven't touched anything in the engine bay of that car yet. I did, however, scoop a aluminum 5.3 short block from a buddy Taylor in town, and he actually gave me a good deal on it, when not actually like he would normally, but we agreed on a price. I just wanted the short block. He pulled the heads. The bottom end was crusty, very crusty. This is what I imagine it looked like when they hauled this up from the bottom of the ocean. And it was just coming up spinning like this. But after some scrubbing and some honing with a dingleberry, we have a short block going together. So right now, this is a just standard bearing slap for the most part. I bought measuring equipment to measure it, and then after attempting to measure one main bearing, I decided that I don't want to do that anymore. I'm just going to plastic gauge it and slap it together. So here's my opinion on this plastic gauge, chuck it together short blocks, and why I think it's a better idea for most people than actually trying to make it right. Hear me out. If your bearing clearances, if you want to get them specifically precise, no matter what, you got to go to the machine shop and have them machine the block and get it within spec, right? Line hone and bore and all that. However, majority of people that are putting these things together aren't taking it to a machine shop. They're spending $500 to $1,000 on a long block dropout, and at most they're chucking some rings at it and rolling on. So at the end of the day, the only thing you can really do is standard or X bearings. And there's some bearings that are thinner shells than other or whatever. But if you don't measure it, then it basically is not your fault when it comes apart. And that's what I'm going with. So like I was gonna measure, but I would rather place the blame on anything else for a failure than my own, dim-wittedness. So I slapped standard bearings. One of the main bearings got an X on one side, so it was a little looser on one of them. I don't remember which one. I just kind of drew smiley faces and frowny faces. That's how I tell if it needs more or less clearance. It's a smiley face chart that I have. It's progressively more upset smileys. And I don't know what any of them mean. So going back over my main clearances, this one was fine. This one I was probably unsure about, but I said, whatever. I didn't want to talk about the thrust, clearly. This one was, I'm guessing, loose, mouth open situation. And I don't know what that, either triple X poison or a dead smiley on the 5th. So that's the scale. And then on this side, oh no, baby, what is you doing? And I don't know who wrote that. That was not me. Somebody's been in my business. Anyway, I actually had this whole thing together, dingle-honed and slapped together. And then on one of the last pistons, I noticed I had a broken piston ring, second ring on it. I should actually also shout out Les Rodriguez. I posted up wanting Gen 4 pistons and rods. He sent me this set, and I was too lazy to like actually re-ring it. And then when I got to like one of the last pistons, I was like, oh man, I didn't really check any of the other pistons. So I'm popping them back out now, checking piston ring gap, and then cleaning up the actual ring landings on all of the pistons and throwing them back in and torquing them down. So we'll be able to have a short block ready to transplant whatever is salvageable out of this engine back into this engine. So I am, again, going back through all of these to make sure that I don't have any more piston ring issues. Again, my own fault for not checking. And I have new rings sitting. I just elected not to use them because I'm lazy. But the broken piston ring that I do have, or if you have at home, use that broken piston ring to dig into the ring groove and get all your crud out. If you're gonna re-ring it, you might as well get all that carbon and buildup and trash out of the way. Same deal on the oil control ring at the bottom. You can pop that out and clean that out. You just make sure it's super, super clean because everybody knows Junkyard 5.3s, just crusty Junkyard 5.3s don't ever work. You have to clean them out diligently for them to do anything cool. Also, Engine Tech bearings is what I elected to purchase because they were the cheapest on Rock Auto. Somebody in the comment section of one of my posts said that Engine Tech main and rod bearings are made by King, which I don't know to be true or false, but the bearings are, I mean, they look like bearings, so that matters. The cam bearings on the early and later model blocks are different on first and last cap too. So you're going to have to find out, measure the ID of the bore to find out which bearing you need. That's something I just decided to order both sets of cam bearings because the Engine Tech cam bearings were ridiculously cheap. One tool that I never knew I would need or want is this cam bearing install tool from Summit Racing. I think it's like 60 or 70 bucks. It's specific to the LS, and I was always terrified of replacing cam bearings because I just assumed it was a giant pain in the ass. It's really not that bad at all. And this tool, the price point and the cost of cam bearings, it was kind of a no-brainer. The only thing that is a little temperamental on cam bearings is you have to line up the hole itself with the hole in the bore. And there's two holes. My guess is from manufacturing, they have the fixture or whatever has two. And if you're wondering how I came to that conclusion, it's because I watched a video on Summit Racing where the guy's like, it's probably a fixturing thing. And I'm like, I'm gonna for sure say that in my video because that sounds intelligent. Okay, now that that's all done, well, this piston rather, piston ring orientation. The top ring I have at 3 o'clock, the gap. The second ring I have at 9 o'clock. And then the oil control ring on the bottom, I have the top gap right yonder way. And then the bottom oil control ring I have yonder way. So they V out by the second oil control, or the second piston ring down. So the other thing you could do is just Google piston ring orientation, better explanation than Logan's clapped out video. That would probably help more than what I just said. Another thing that I have to praise for a second are the BTR piston ring compressors. These piston ring compressors have, the bottom has this chamfered edge that actually sits inside, well, the lip itself sits inside the bore, and a chamfered edge at the bottom. So when you go to install your pistons and rods, you're not hanging rings up on top of the block. So like the AutoZone ratchet style compressors are piles of junk, and these are not expensive. They are well worth the money. If you're just doing 5.3 refreshes, get a 3780 bore piston ring compressor. And that's not a sales pitch. I promise you'll thank me because look, I'm a one finger. Let me see, well, two finger just for even Stevensness. Look at that. Like a glove. So adding up, what do we have into this refresh, this Pro Mod engine rebuild? I want to throw together kind of a spec sheet on like what it truly costs to refresh one of these if you are just trying to slap it together. I mean, to professionally build it. Because I think that's why most people would watch this video is, number one, what part numbers do I need? And number two, how cheap is it going to be? And I'll run through that real quick with you. All right, so these are the bearings I used on this build. The connecting rod bearings and main bearings, I got standard and 1 thou undersized, just in case I need a little bit more clearance. Camshaft bearings, I got both early and later model block sizes because I didn't want to wait on another set should I have a later model block and order early. I was unsure which I had. And then the piston ring set is just a standard piston ring set. That was $146.10. Camshaft bearing install tool from Summit Racing, that was $79.99. The BTR ring compressor came in at $39.99. And the plasti gauge set, that came in at $4.99. And the ball hone, there's a couple options. This particular model, 240 grit, was $65.99. The final tally on these parts comes out to $337.06. This doesn't include the cost of your short block to start or any other parts you may need. When you get down to it, a stock bottom end refresh is not as cheap as people like to make it seem. It does cost some money. Now, a lot of that stuff, the cam bearing install tool, for example, or me buying 2 sets of bearings, that stuff can be avoided and can be cheaper. It can also be more expensive if you run higher dollar bearings, things like that. At the end of the day, I think a lot of the reason people just take a junkyard engine out and just chuck it in a car is because more often than not, like I said earlier, you're not going to pay somebody to machine an engine to stock bottom end specs. Why would you just not do pistons and rods at that point? I lucked out, and Les Rodriguez, a buddy of mine on Facebook, sent me a set of Gen 4 pistons and rods. I should have or could have had the crank balanced specifically to those pistons and rods, but I didn't. I just brassoed the crank journals and rolled on. And an aluminum block is obviously going to be more expensive than an iron block if you can find them. But at the end of the day, I completely understand why, like the Caprice engine, for example, I popped those bearings out, looked at them, they did not look good, and I was like, and I put them back in. Now that car did make it through drag week. It did drop oil pressure in the middle of drag week, but we're still up in the air on why it did. So when I pull that engine apart, it'll be interesting to see what got taken out to drop 30 pounds of oil pressure. Woo! I'm out of breath. Couple other sneak peeks. You'll notice this carbon fiber wang on top of the Caprice. This unit will be making its way onto the back of the RX-7. The FD, this gem. We've been out a couple times with this car this season. I still don't have videos from taking it out because I've just been lazy. However, it has gone 830s so far this year. We haven't had a good track to put under it to go A to B, but I'm hoping that that changes before the end of the season. We have, I want to say, less than 10 hits on the car in total, and we are already faster than it was with the LS. That being said, I never really pushed the LS combo, so I can't really make that as a generalized statement. But I'm excited to get this thing rolling. I'm excited. Actually, I shouldn't say this. Don't listen. I'm more excited for this thing. I'm just really stoked about the Caprice. It was an awesome adventure on drag week, and I have fallen in love with the car. So much so that obviously the Datsun has been sold. Anyway, this is my first video back in a while. I hope you guys hate it. Head over to clappedout.com. All t-shirts are on sale, $15. Bye. This is the end of the episode. I'm really sorry it wasn't more fun to watch. Everything I do lately seems to drag me down into a pit of despair. Oh, this song's taking a turn for the worse. Hey, instead, let's look at some pretty animals at the zoo. I got it. Here, look. It works on the cats at home. Yeah.